our economy well with an eye to keeping inflation down and interest rates low. And that's the national government. It's time for a change. I think they're a bit tired. Oh, sorry.
I just wanted to say something about long-term strategies that have been mentioned. And that's what my question is about. I just want to quote a recent article by Max Rashbrook, and he said that successive New Zealand governments have prioritised short-term quick fixes over comprehensive long-term strategies, and that's one of the reasons I think why you were saying it's going here and it's going there, and because we've got a 3-year term, nobody ever gets anything done. But that's another issue, but it does impact on it. And I think there's so many short-term fixes that people want to now short-term fix the fact that we've got this cost of living crisis. Cost of living crisis is all over the world. It's not just dependent on one parliament. Cost of living crisis is...
question, please.
Yeah, my question is, a recent example of a National Party policy to allocate proceeds from the ETS to fund tax cuts for people who experience cost of living challenges is an example of a short-term quick fix. If elected, will you commit to ring-fencing the proceeds from the ETS for long-term climate action strategies and resilience? I really agree that we need to go there, but I would like to see policies hitting climate as well as cost of living in one go. We've got to be really smart.
Okay, so
I
we'll
would like to commit to having a fund for this.
Yeah, so we'll let Nicola ask that. Thank you.
So we think there is going to be a need to fund both policies to reduce emissions and to allow our country to adapt to the reality of climate change. We think that should happen through the normal budget process, through operating and capital funding. For example, on this election campaign, we've announced our policy to co-fund an electric vehicle charging network across New Zealand, what we think is fundamental infrastructure so that people can switch to the use of electric vehicles. For example, we currently have in New Zealand a $6 billion National Resilience Fund. We think that needs to be continued into the future. When we look at infrastructure for the future, we need to be working with local governments and with regions and cities to allocate funding for the infrastructure projects needed to withstand climate change. So we see a real case for those long-term investments, but we don't think taking the ETS funds to one side and marking them climate change is the way to do it. We want to keep the ETS sustainable by taking its revenue back to income taxpayers.
Why you haven't got climate change?
No, so what, I'll just remind everyone.
You're saying that you're not, that you haven't put
Yes.
it in your policies.
You've had your opportunity, thank you. I'll just remind everyone, let's keep our questions direct to the point. Most of us are well read in here, we understand the issues, so let's get, we don't want to waste time on hearing what people have to say on their thinking. Let's get straight to the question. So, sir.
Question for everyone. According to our friends in the energy business, the Energy Resources NZ, we will soon be drawing down large amounts of carbon from the air, carbon dioxide, and pumping it underground. This is known as CCUS. Huge amounts, gigatons.
Question.
Who's paying for it? Where's the money coming from?
Right.
How much is it?
The question I've got is actually Greg.
Yeah. I don't think that science is settled yet, is it? Certainly not settled to the extent that we're going to actually be starting, to let's all drive V8s because we're going to be able to take it all and put it back underground. We're a long way away from that, and I think it may well be. I do think there will be some science in the future that will give us the opportunity to mitigate some of this. But I think we are dreaming if we think that we're going to develop the science to take out of the air the carbon that we have emitted.
Can I just correct you on that? The science, the IPCC, say that we require this, it must happen.
Yeah, well, I'm saying that the science is not, we haven't got that science yet. Certainly, I'll be corrected, but certainly on my reading of it, it might come, but there's a lot of other things that might come too that will enable us. But in the end, nothing is certain enough to allow us to do anything other than what we're doing, is to try and mitigate and reduce our carbon
The
emissions.
question was, where's the money coming from? Can you assume it's going to happen because the IPCC says it has to happen?
Well, I don't have the answer for that because at the moment it hasn't been committed because, as I say, the science isn't settled enough yet.
Stephanie.
Second. Sure. So once again, I'm not a climate nerd, so I'm not going to try to give you a good question. What I can say, bouncing back to the previous answer, is that yes, we believe that emissions trading scheme revenue should go into climate action, climate mitigation, climate adaptation, whichever one of those. They're all great and we probably need to do all of them because there's no stopping it, but there is slowing it down, and either way our current infrastructure is not coping. All I can say is, again, someone will need to pay for it because climate change is happening, and I think having a strong green voice in Parliament and in government is the best way to ensure that it happens sooner rather than, again, kicking it down the road for 3 more years and hoping someone else will have to deal with it.
Thanks, Stephanie. Nicola.
I'm part of a wing of our party called the Blue Greens, which is a part of our party that is about making sure we match capitalism and market economics with environmentalism. One of our core principles is we should be led by the science and the evidence. So when the science and the evidence tells us that we can offset our emissions through forestry plantations or in the future through seaweed, then yes, we should explore it. When the science and the evidence tells us that sequestration will viably reduce emissions into the atmosphere, then yes, we should pursue it. And those options should be available to a range of people to offset their emissions.
So you don't believe it's available yet either? Is that what you're saying?
Well, I understand that sequestration isn't yet at a price where firms are prepared to invest in it, but that it's getting to the point where they will be very interested in the future.
So why are we still emitting?
Well, as I say, I think the science is still emerging here and it's not yet at a price point that people are doing it. But I think when it does get to that point, we shouldn't cut off any options.
Energy resources, they have the plan for New Zealand, right? They are the PEPANs, they have a 100-page document. CCUS appears 200 times in that 100-page document. So your friends in the oil industry are deeply, deeply into CCUS, I'm sorry.
Well, as I say, sir, I think if it's an option that stops fossil fuels emitting to the atmosphere and contributing to climate change, we should be open to exploring it if the science and the evidence backs it up.
And it doesn't, that's the point.
Okay, well if it doesn't, we shouldn't. Only if the science and evidence
Maybe we shouldn't be
backs
emitting.
up.
Maybe we shouldn't be emitting.
Martin, have you got an opinion here?
For as long as I can remember, many years, 50 years plus, there's been total neglect in this country on building proper infrastructure and also mitigating against the impact of climate change. For example, coastlines and rivers, we've talked about that before, and that's why they had the trouble in Hawke's Bay. They had, for years, people have been asking for work to be done, pleaded with council, pleaded with governments, more. So I believe there has to be a levy. It will come. And that will help pay for what we're talking about and these other costs. Because infrastructure and this sort of thing is a lot of money. You're talking billions and billions. And as I say, it's been neglected for so long. Yeah.
Thanks, Martin. And Jessica.
I don't know the details of the technology you're talking about, but I think the gist is that what we're having is big emitters saying, don't worry, we don't really have to change our lifestyles at all because something's going to come down the road and take care of everything for us. That's sort of the gist of it? Yeah, so bullshit, right? What we need to do is actually stop emitting. And certainly when it comes to energy, we're in a pretty fortunate place in New Zealand compared to the rest of the world because we have incredible natural endowments of ways of creating clean energy. What we don't have at the moment is a really clear vision that we can be sure of, no matter who's in charge of the government, that says we really, really care about this and we are going to reduce our emissions as fast as possible, and we're not going to mess with our emissions trading scheme, which is the thing we're relying on and getting down to carbon zero. We're not going to crash the carbon price. We're not going to talk about white elephant projects like Lake Onslow. We're going to have a really clear, strong direction that gets us investing in the technologies we need to actually reduce our emissions, not just rely on offsetting.
Thanks, Jessica.